2, 3, 4.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Power of Music Thinking. My name is Christoph Zürn, and this is the podcast for people with a musical heart and a wicked job. We're looking for stories, insights and tools from the big world of music to inspire leaders and followers to listen, tune, play and perform in whatever field you're operating. Today we're in Sweden and we speak with Carolin Seiferth, a PhD student at the Stockholm Resilience Centre, where she does research on the island of Öland. Carolin combines scientific research with music to raise awareness about sustainability issues around the Baltic Sea. In this way, she inspires the audience to take action to address challenges related to a changing climate. And Carolin shares some insights with us about her research and the creative production that led to the musical piece Dialogues as part of the Baltic Sea Festival Science Lab. We talked about her creative and dialogue-based approach with local actors in different workshops and how she transformed the results of her investigation into a poem that was a central part of the musical composition. We reflect on the different sound qualities of rainfall and her curiosity to explore other ways of combining art-based approaches with scientific research in the future, to create opportunities for engaging with sustainability questions on a much deeper level. Okay, here we go. Welcome, Carolin. Welcome to the Power of Music Thinking.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christoph.
Okay, let's start with our ritualistic question that I ask every guest. What's your first sonic experience or album or performance that had an impact on you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. When I think about a performance, I remember the musical Tabaluga that I saw with my parents as a child. And this musical is about a small dragon. He's called Tabaluga. And this little dragon is having the task or the challenge of defending the world against the cold and defending the world against the cold with fire. And I don't remember all the different elements of the story, but I remember that at the end, of course, the good wins over the evil. And I think this experience really stuck with me because it was my first musical that I saw in a theater. And I was really fascinated by this combination of acting, playing on stage, but also singing and dancing. And I was fascinated by the actors who could really do all these different things at one time.
Yeah, wow, nice. It's Peter Maffay, right? The composer?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and Peter Maffay, he's, let me think about it. It's also a German, not Schlager, but German sung pop music, I would say. And Tabaluga is first, or maybe is only a musical.
I think so. And maybe my parents took me there because they liked the music of Peter Maffay and thought that's a fun way of combining, getting me out into the theater world and them sitting in the audience and enjoying listening to his music. But I think when I think about the story now, it's really interesting when we think of sustainability challenges, because back in the days in the Tabaluga musical, it was about defending the world against the cold. And now it's almost the opposite way around, right? We have to fight the climate crisis and we have to address the problem of a constantly warming planet.
And interesting that this was a theme already some years ago, but I also can remember in the 70s when we had Sundays free of car driving because of the oil crisis, and then as a kid you think, oh wow, later in 10 years, which is long, or maybe 20 years, and now it's much longer, then something will be different and changed. and later you realized that you only can be a part of the change.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's almost on us to find our inner tapalugas and do our small part in addressing these big problems of our time.
Nice, absolutely. Okay, so Carolin, I found you via the internet, and I really don't remember how exactly, but okay, I'm always looking for interesting stories or interesting things or performances that have to do with music on the one side, but with other things on the other side. And so I reached out to you. So, but maybe you introduce yourself for the listener. Who are you? What do you do? And then we dive into why we are here.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm currently a PhD student at the Stockholm Resilience Centre, and I'm based in Stockholm. I'm conducting research on an island called Öland. Öland is Sweden's second largest island off the Swedish east coast. And it's an island that has really experienced the effects of climate change at the doorstep. And it's quite interesting because Öland is a very long island and it's a very flat island. And it's covered by only a very thin soil cover, which holds very little capacity to store water. And next to this, we also see that there is really low groundwater levels. And there has been recurring heat waves and droughts over the last years. And of course, in relation to climate change, we also see a lot of variability in precipitation. And this means that, over the last years, the problem of water scarcity has become a very big issue. And also on the island, there's a lot of agriculture, there's a lot of tourism, and it's really troubling for the year-round inhabitants to live under these circumstances. And
Was this a change only in the last, let's say, 10 years, or when did this start?
Yeah, one can say that the island has experienced these low groundwater levels over the last 10 years. But then we had really big droughts in 2016 and 2018, where the situation was actually so severe that water trucks had to drive over the bridge and carrying over drinking water to the island because there was simply nothing left in the reservoirs.
Right, and we have to remember it's not Africa, it's Sweden.
It's interesting because sometimes when I talk about my research, people say, oh, this sounds more like Southern Europe. And then I tell them, no, it's an island off the Swedish east coast. So yeah, it happens here as well.
And what's the biggest city from Öland? So do we know Öland? Or maybe it's a tourist, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the biggest city is just located on the other side of the bridge. It's called Färjestad. And this one is popular, but then there's also another smaller city, Borgholm. It's a little bit north of Färjestad. But maybe people know Kalmar, which is on the other side of the bridge on the mainland, Swedish mainland.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about a 5-hour drive south of Stockholm.
Maybe you can tell a little bit more about the project with the Baltic Sea Festival, because now this is the Power of Music Thinking podcast, and normally we don't talk about, let's say, climate change. However, this, there's always some kind of overlap with other themes, but you did something very special, and maybe you can talk about this.
It was only when I was half a year into my PhD that one of my friends forwarded me an email. And she just wrote, oh, this kind of announcement or this offer sounds very much like you. And I was, of course, very intrigued by this one sentence. So I started to look through the advertisement of this email. And it was like a call for the Baltic Sea Festival, the Östersjöfestivalen, which is a festival for classical music that takes place every year here in Stockholm. And as part of this festival, the organizers were planning to host the Baltic Sea Festival Science Lab, which they created as a new initiative to invite young researchers who conduct research in and around and on the Baltic Sea to share their research in a very different way and with very new audiences. And while this all sounded a little bit vague, it sounded also very interesting to me. And I thought that is such a great project because I also read that we will be teamed up with a composer, and we'll work in half a year process to have our research translated into a classical composition. And I thought, that sounds really cool. And the first thing I was thinking was that, like, okay, everybody kind of knows or can kind of picture water scarcity, but we all have no idea how water scarcity would sound like. So I applied.
So normally we have water music, so I think there are very famous examples. Handel or other kinds of music. Handel, by the way, is the German composer, and you're also from Germany, right?
Yes, born and raised in Germany.
Yeah.
Then moved to Sweden for my studies and stayed here for the PhD.
There's also a link with music. So you said you have some kind of musical background?
Yes. So, of course, this call also attracted me because music was always part of my life. As I said earlier, I'm a big fan of musicals. So there I really enjoy being in the audience and being fascinated by these different worlds presented on stage. And then when I went to primary school, I actually also had a chance to be part of a musical that we rehearsed together with our teacher. Together with two of my friends who were also participating in this musical, we then came together and formed a band, and we were playing together for 7-8 years. And that was, of course, a lot of fun. Yeah, just trying to cover some songs and then also moving on to writing our own songs. And
Nice. What kind of band was it?
It was a very small band. It was only the three of us. If people ask me what kind of music we made, I think I would say it was kind of singer-songwriter, pop, folk music. We all played a lot of different instruments, so we would usually just shifting around a little bit, and every song would have another type of instrumentalization. So that was kind of fun.
So you were taking turns on the instrument. So what instruments were there involved?
Yeah, so there was, of course, like drums and different kinds of percussions. We had a cajon. There was guitars, different sizes of guitars. We even had a guitarlele. We had a ukulele. We even had a violin and piano. And at one point, we also had a nose flute. But that wasn't so successful.
But it looks cool.
It does.
But that's interesting. If you play together with three people and not everybody has his own instrument, like one is the guitar player, the drums, and maybe a keyboard. So that's interesting. So all of you play different instruments. So that's in that sense also a broader view on music, because it depends on what you would like to play, and or you could play also the other part. But how does this work, or how did this work?
I think it just allowed us to be very flexible in how we want to interpret certain songs. And I think it was also fun to sometimes, when we had a concert or something, to just switch around a little bit. And now I played the guitar, next song I'm going to play the piano. This time you sing, this time I sing. Now we can sing together. So just even if we were only three, it gave us a lot of space to be creative and have fun together. So that was cool.
Yeah, that's nice. Working in trio is very dynamic. Because there's always a 2-1 or a 1-2 situation, and you always try to make it a 3, so that the three of you play together. By the way, I'm making all the time analogies to the business world, or to how we work together. So that's very interesting in how people would work together in an office. And do they play their instrument, like doing only one thing, or can do, like in a startup, you would do different tasks and everybody could do something, and maybe later you just decide who is doing what. But how was it to work together with the composer? Was the story first, and the story in this case is Öland and the water scarcity, or was it like more from create a musical sphere and then add the text to it? How did this work?
Yeah, it was a very interesting process, and was also a process that unfolded over half a year. And it was not only my composer Sampo Kasurinen from Finland and I, but it was also our producer, Elisabeth Junga, who was kind of with us to make sure that we, over the whole half a year, make sure to always speak kind of the same language when we meet. So Sampo and I, we met for the first time over Zoom in January last year, so kind of 1 year ago. I started to explain my research to him and to Elisabeth, and I was sharing some of the texts I already had produced and some of our work we do on Öland. And for them, it was very interesting to learn more about the project. But I also said, yeah, you have to kind of start to write a text with which we could work. So I started to, kind of package my research into a poem. Not a poem that necessarily rhymes, but just a way of creative writing and distilling my thoughts. Kind of to my surprise, Sampo and Elisabeth were really in love with this poem, and we started to base our discussions around it. And Sampo started to get the composition process going. It was very interesting because the first idea he had was just handing over the poem to his partner who was playing the violin, and she was improvising on her violin based on the words she would hear, because I had recorded the poem. And she would just improvise, and based on her first improvising, Sampo then started to write the music.
That's like some kind of prototyping, like just improvise around it and pick out stuff that you like, then try to write something and then bring it to the final version. But one question about the poem, I think that's very interesting. If you think about poems, sometimes the question is it descriptive? Do you describe something, or do you have a picture that you in some way try to bring over? And and there are different forms of poems where you more try to evoke, let's say, an emotion or a feel instead of giving details. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
I can describe a little bit the process of how, I wrote the poem and the different elements of it. And then I'll share the link with you where everyone who listens to the podcast can watch the recording online. But I used kind of the theme of the year and all the different months within a year as a framing for my poem. So we start kind of in January, February, March, where it's cold on the island. It rains from time to time. There's a lot of rainfall, and there seems to be enough water. And then we're transitioning into April and May, where there's a lot of changes in the weather. And we also see some first tourists coming to the island. There's still sufficient amount of water. Nobody's really concerned that it's going to be a dry year again or anything. Situation seems quite hopeful. But then all suddenly summer kicks in, and it's just starting to be very dry. People are really waiting for the rain. The farmers are especially waiting for the rain. The cows are waiting for the rain, but there's just no rain coming. So people start to feel very concerned. There is this fear that it might be another one of these very extreme years where, people just don't know how to actually get over the summer. And then September comes, but yet there is no rainfall. And then October, where finally the rain comes back and the farmers can finally harvest. And November and December continue to be all drier than usual. And people start to realize that it must be related to climate change. So there was really this dramatic arc in our in my poem, but then also in the composition, where we tried to package different feelings, feelings of fear, but also towards the end, feelings of hope. And Sampo started to write the music. And at one point, Elisabeth also said, well, the story you're telling in your poem, it's very general, and it's maybe not specific enough to exactly the research that you're doing. And we were thinking a little bit about it, and we were discussing about it with Sampo as well. And we then added a whole part, which actually talks about the research I'm doing together with my 2 supervisors on the island. And it's a process, it's a dialogue-based process that we refer to as knowledge co-production, where we invited a range of different actors, everyone from farmers, the nature protection organizations, local and regional authorities, to come together and to work towards a more inclusive, community-based approach to managing water in the landscape. And then as part of this dialogue process, we hosted 3 different workshops over the range of 6 months. And the first workshop was about understanding the problem on the island with water scarcity, but also mapping the island as a system and growing together as a group of different people who will work together over the next couple of months and hopefully also way beyond that. And the second workshop was then also really fun because we took everybody outside and we visited 3 different places on the island, which are positive examples where people have done different interventions to keep more water in the landscape. And we kind of leverage these place-based stories and how people relate to certain places on the island. And then the third workshop, we were kind of back inside, back together, and we developed 4 different strategies to address Öland's water scarcity issues. And the cool thing is that, since I'm just at the beginning of my PhD, I'll hopefully also be part of the process of implementing, these strategies in the future. And so we added a whole paragraph, if you want it like that, to the poem, which was about the 3 workshops, to also make it more related to the actual research that I'm doing. And at first, Sampo, I think, was a little bit hesitant because it seemed that adding the 3 workshops was a little bit too researchy. But then at the end, I think that's what really made the difference. And it was also that through the workshop series and talking to people, we also felt that this is a way of actual change making. And if you get so many different interests and perspectives together, there is really this moment of, you can actually make changes because it's so much easier to understand where another person is coming from with their perspectives, but also how other people can help you in making change yourself.
I think it's a beautiful process. And also starting the project that at the very end, this will be a festival piece. On the other hand, there is a country or a region involved. There's happening something in the region or not happening. And you get into a process that starts with the creative approach of first writing it as a poem and then working into it, and also with the workshop. I think that's a very beautiful way to weave the people of the land, like the farmers and everybody who lives there, together with an artificial, or not with an artificial, but with an art-based work to bring everything together. Was it also played in Öland?
It was not played on Öland, but it was we performed it as part of the Stockholm Festival, the Baltic Sea Festival. And in this process of bringing like the text and the music together, it was also very interesting because Sampo then like used my recorded text to kind of put the music on top of it, kind of as a top layer. And then it also came to the point where we had the first rehearsal with the musicians. And it was very interesting because all the other pairs, composer and scientist, they kind of chose this path of like first having text, then having music, then having text, then having music. But Sampo really appreciated like my idea with the dialogues, because we were playing with this idea of dialogues. It's dialogues that we had with the local actors on Öland. And then we also wanted to have a dialogue of like between me on stage and the musicians, but also among all of us on stage and our audience. So the piece is called Dialogues. And in the first rehearsal, it became really clear that it's impossible for only the musicians to rehearse. I had to be part of the rehearsal as well. I needed to be on stage, and then it was really interesting to see how Sampo also wrote down my text pieces into the composition, because he finally packaged everything in like neat little text boxes that had a little arrow pointing exactly on the tone or note, where they had to hear a certain word from me, and then the clarinet, for example, would start
All right.
playing.
So you were working with cue words, for example. So this gave you a little bit more space in maybe at a certain moment, make it a little bit quicker, or take your time to really get it in, and the musicians have to react on your cue words. What cue words were there, for example? Do you remember?
There were many. There were many cue words. It was sometimes they had to listen to me, and sometimes I also had to listen to them. And I think how Sampo framed it was like the text is a kind of conductor. That's what he told everyone when we started rehearsing. And for example, at one point, the violin, the viola, they were imitating kind of windy sounds. And then I had to listen to that, and I knew that only after a couple of seconds I would start. Or sometimes the clarinet would give me a little bit of a signal, performing a little bit of a circle with the clarinet, and then I knew, okay, now it's time for me to start again. And sometimes when I said nothing, for example, there was a keyword, I just said nothing, and then there was silence. Then I said the second nothing, and then all suddenly the percussion would come in, and it would be quite loud sounds. So that was a really interesting process. And I think I was a little bit lucky to be able to side read notes, to be able to learn when to listen to others and when the others have to listen to me.
Wow, it also sounds very, very, like you had a lot of fun. And it's like co-creation, work together. And but I also find it interesting that the text is a kind of conductor, what you just said, or what Sampo said. That sounds interesting. In one of the other podcasts, we had text compositions from Pauline Oliveros, which are short, let's say, some kind of instructions to do something. And I always found it interesting in a business setting to use this, let's say, musical principle in doing a text composition, which actually are, I would say, very close to poems, to describe something and to really write them with an impact of that people can do something with it. And I found this so nice, because you don't necessarily have to play a musical instrument to get into that co-creation. Where in the workshops that you mentioned before, in the dialogue-based process, were there also musicians involved or the composer involved?
No, but there were some people working as artists on the side, and also working at the Folkhögskolan, which is, if you translate it word by word, it's like the folk high school. So it's kind of a college, I think. And there they would also work with a lot of arts-based processes. And that's definitely something this project also kind of sparked my interest in, and something I would like to explore further, how to combine research also with arts-based processes, and especially music processes. I think that would be fun to dive a little bit deeper into.
Yeah. The difference between composition and improvisation and different ways of how you construct music. That's where I'm pretty much in music thinking, or the power of music thinking. When we think about different kinds of music, what can we learn from indigenous people, how they make music? Think about Japan or Australia, or maybe in the case of Sweden, it could also be the Sami, for example, just to name something. And what can we learn from them in sounding different, so that we hear different in the way how we see or hear or listen to the world, what's happening. And I think there's also a little bit a link to an earlier episode with Mike van der Namer about sonification, in the way, how can you add music or sounds as music to let's say to a discussion or to a process, and then with the question, will you literally describe the music? So like in water would be like something flowing or something repetitive or with a little bit changes, or is it something that you say, okay, when we talk about water, everybody knows what it is and how it sounds, and now let's see what can we do with the water that we feel. Is the water warm or cold? Is it much water or less water? Is it blue or green? Is this something that you encountered in this process?
Yeah, I think when Sampo presented the first drafts of the composition, so to say, you could of course hear a lot of different ways of rainfall. So sometimes you would hear distant rainfall in the like somewhere far away. Sometimes it would be pouring rain. Sometimes it would just be little drops here and there, depending on where we are in the year. And I think the most powerful way he thought about rainfall for me was just the silence. Because it was really in the silence where you could also sense in the audience that there was really this feeling of fear emerging. What will be the next? What would be the next step? What would the next month look like? And this is, of course, also something we had captured in the conversations on Öland, just like this fear of how to continue. So I think for me, it was really important to make sure that everything we've heard and learned from our actors on Öland also finds its way into this project. And I also saw this project as a way to kind of raise awareness on these water scarcity issues here in Sweden, but also beyond. But that was really important for me.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful or special in the way that you can, if you would share your research, it would be a report. And I'm now thinking at the moment like your PhD. So I would expect that it maybe is a poem or a collection of different poems instead of just giving information, more like trying to inspire people to think, trying to think about their own situation. What a poem does, it reaches you, it touches you emotionally, and then you say, "Oh, hang on, let's take a break and let's think about it. How I am feeling in that way." So I think that artistic process or approach is a very interesting one. Is this something that you would like to do more? So could we expect that let's say your final PhD report might be a concert?
Well, that depends a lot on the flexibility of how we can actually defend our PhD. I think my PhD will still be a book with 4 or 5 different consecutive papers that I'll publish. But I think there's a little bit of room that actually the composition that Sampo wrote will be part of my PhD book. And I think there might also be a way of having like a screening maybe of the musical piece again when I defend. This is still kind of far in the future, but I like to entertain the idea of having a little bit of a musical component to the actual defense. But the cool thing is with the Baltic Sea Festival Science Lab that they will actually continue this format in this year's festival. And again, it will take place in August here in Stockholm. And this year it's going to be 6 young researchers being paired with 6 young composers. And they will showcase their research and communicate some of their findings, some of their insights to a much bigger audience than we might usually reach with our scientific publications. And I think this is really cool because I think in our case, it was really these different calls for action for a more sustainable future of the Baltic Sea, which then kind of came nicely together as an orchestrated call to action. And I think this combination of research and music really allowed us to communicate emotions And through this process, we also hope that we kind of spark the interest in these sustainability topics in our listeners, and then hopefully also inspire them to take action themselves. So that was kind of the big hopes behind the project.
Oh, that's a beautiful idea. And I think even if people are listening now from a scientific perspective or a musical perspective, they might be inspired from, hey, this is something that we could do too. And like you started, let's say, as a singer-songwriter, it doesn't necessarily has to be an orchestra, but everybody can bring information and let's better say knowledge, because it's not just information. It's not just giving the facts. It's just interpreting the facts and doing something with it. And I think that's a very beautiful approach. So thank you, Carolin. I will put everything in the show notes, also the link to the performance. There's a video and maybe also information about the next festival. Is there something that we didn't touch that you would like to share, or give us a tip for people doing research, how they could use music, or even in business, how they could go the musical way?
I think this is maybe a call to all other researchers out there, that sometimes it might seem a little bit scary at the beginning to really leave our comfort zone and think about how we could do stuff differently, how we could do our research differently, or how we could communicate our research in new and different ways. But I think for me, and also I think for the other researchers who were part of this process, it really showed us that leaving the comfort zone is 100% worth it. It kind of leaves you with new ideas, with new inspiration, and also new motivation to carry on the research you do. And also based on the feedback we received from the audience, I think I would love to see more of these projects happening that kind of build these bridges between different parts of society. So I think, go for it. That's my advice.
Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate this, because listening is one of the top leadership skills, and I feel honored about this. It is my mission to find, create, and share inspirations for meaningful collaboration based on music analogies. If you want to support this, please subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, or write a review on iTunes or Spotify. And more inspirations can be found on musicthinking.com. We have a blog, and you can download the Music Thinking Framework. And finally, I would love to hear your feedback. And if you need help with a business challenge, please reach out to me via email, podcast@musicthinking.com.